Hello, welcome back or welcome newcomers. We had so much fun doing our no sketch bunny. I thought I'd try this little cute little duck that visited us while we were eating lunch at a local fish fry. So let's get started. I'm looking at my paper right now and I'm thinking, okay, the duck's gonna go here. So his eye needs to be around here, and that just kind of gives me a start. And he's got like a little bit of an almond shape. And you can go in kind of light. Dark color doesn't have to be black. Let's just get that center portion. And that just gives us an indication of where it's going to be. I typically have eyes, bird's eyes usually have a little bit of a rim around it. So we'll just get that started. And I don't like it to be too perfect, so that's looking pretty good. I'm going in with a fairly wet amount of water and paint, and I'm just going to start to introduce this red area. I just want to get more of a pinkish tone. So let's just, all we're doing right now is getting the shapes of things. So, you know, look at the relationship. We need some red area around the eye. It comes down and it forms the beak. And then you can, you know, add a little more, once you get kind of the base shape, you can go in and add a little more color if you want. Just to show the shape, the contours. And you can always go back in with another layer, so you're not trying to get it all done in this one stage. Okay, and I see there's a little bit of the dark pigment, whatever you use for the eyes, you can use for this little rounded off section of the beak. We do that, and I see there's a little bit in here. So I'm just kind of looking at the reference photo to get ideas while it's still wet, and I can get some of these fun shapes. And it's okay. So we'll put the pupil back in. And I'll list all the colors that I'm using, but really it's anything you see in the photo, and you can even make up colors. So use whatever paints you have. I'm still pretty wet here. So we'll come back and finish that up later, but we have the general area, which is good. Now remember, with watercolor, you don't need to paint the white. So for this area on top of its head, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with some water only, and I'm going to pull out the shape of the duck. And we can borrow a little bit of the red just to give a little hint of color. But what I'm trying to do is cover this so that, one, I know what shape I'm doing, but also then we can add the additional colors we want to add. Like I know up here I want this dark color to come across. And go in with your black and form the top of the head. Okay. And now here's where you have to go, okay, well, what's happening with the rest of the body? So again, you can use, you can put a tiny bit of the gray, or sorry, the black that's very watered down to make a gray, and just pull out the shape. So you're basically drawing it, you're just drawing it on the fly. So I'm just getting that body in, hoping my proportions are kind of close wanted to leave room for the feet, so the body might be a little smaller than the head, but that's okay. Okay, so let's do our same trick with the water, and let's just go in for these little tail feathers, just painting it in water only. And now what you can do is go in with your black and let it bleed into that water area. And you can manipulate your paper around, let it run. You can see I'm very watery here, but that's going to make a nice blend and it's going to kind of fade off. So we'll just let that area dry, and I'll try not to touch my brush in here because then all that color would come escaping. So like it did right there. So I'm going to be kind of mindful of that. Okay, now in the tail here, I see a lot of fun colors. I see some greens and some blues. So let's go ahead and paint out just where we want that new color we're going to add to flow. And I don't have to be quite as wet as I am here. You really just need it to be somewhat damp. Using the tip of my brush, I'm just kind of doing some calligraphy marks, some little brushies, just so we get that nice texture. And that feels nice and painterly. Okay, so now let's go ahead and go in with a bit of our green. And we're going to do that here close to the bottom. And we're not trying to draw each of those feathers. We're just trying to flood it with some color because we're going to blend all this into the blue. So now I'm going to go with more of a turquoise, I think, in here just for some excitement. But you can choose any color you think you see. And in fact, I even see some purple. Okay, so those are going to dry lighter, and we can go back in and add some of those feather details on the top. But I do want to get, now that this is a little bit out of our way, I want to add a little more depth up in here with our black and let those intermingle. So now we're going to use that same technique, and we're going to come down in this area, and we're going to add just where we want the black to flow, because the watercolor paint won't go past where the water is. See, it's going to stop here. So then I can just go in and get these cool looking feathery areas. And I will say I love painting birds, and they have so much texture, color, and excitement. So you'll see I often do the birds. If you follow me on Instagram, you know that during the month of October, I participate in Birdtober, and it's super fun. Every day you get a new challenge for doing a different bird, and it definitely challenges you because, one, you got to learn about the birds and what they look like, but you know, it gives you a chance to explore and try some new things. So where you're a little more dry, you can just go in and use the very tip of your brush to start to get some of that, some of those little black feather marks up by the face. And you can see how the black is drying so much softer, so we'll probably go in at the end after all this stuff is a little bit dry. But we're looking pretty good here. So we'll do some marks here. Redefining where our body is. And then you can see my brush always follows the contour of whatever I'm painting. And you just get a lot of benefits from that. You know, one being that it gives you an idea of the shape of what you're painting, your subject matter. But if you miss some areas or you intentionally miss them, it works as a highlight. So just like all the nose sketches, you don't have to be too perfect about it. That's really not the purpose of this. And here where it's dry, I'm just going to go ahead and put in some little wispy marks. So we have a nice combination of blends and spots. Remember where we dry a little bit lighter, we can go back in and add. Now we have to start thinking about the feet. So I have to look and say, I'm not going to start my feet over here because then the duck would be out of balance. So when I see the reference photo, I can see coming down from the head, that's where I want my feet to be in this area. So I've hinted at the leg here, and I'll do the same on this side. That way I know where I want to start putting those feet in. Okay, so just, you know, getting those final little, or maybe not final, but this stage of our blacks. See how pretty this is becoming with those blends. That looks really good in there. Okay, so I'm going to do a little more of that watery blending technique in here because I like the look of it. And we'll do our little water technique here, dabbing in a few blacks. When you paint something, if it's behind something else, so in this case, the neck is farther back than the head, I want this area here to be a little bit darker, and that'll make this little cheek area pop out. And this area is drier, so I can go in and get a little more of the shapes that I wanted in there. The little nostril. I can go back and get some of that brown back in the eye. Should get my smaller brush. I'm not going to go in and do that pupil again right now because I'll be in the same situation I was where it's too wet. But I am going to get that little eye area back in there. Now that it's dried a little bit. Again, with the contouring, I can tell there's a bit of a lump. And so by going in with the top layer, I can set that off. You have to keep track of where your wet areas are. Like here, I kind of goofed and I went in a little too early, but I know this is dry down here, so I'm going to capture that more of a curve here in that, the bill or the beak. I didn't want too hard of a line there, so I'm just adding a little bit of water. It has a little bit of tint in it, so I'm just kind of blending that in. All right, I like where this is headed. We have the shape. Let's go ahead and lay in the feet. So I like to think about the feet are made up of several colors. There's some yellows. I even see some purples and some of the darker, maybe blacks. And so what I want to do is just go in with the shape first. So just using whatever you have close to ochre. I have a raw sienna light, which is going to work out fine. And remember, we have our little leg here. So using the shape of your brush, it already comes to a point. So if I just lay it down in those areas where I want the point, I get the nice shape. And I can see that the feet overlap, so we're in good shape here with our proportions, or, close enough. So it's yellow, it's not going to dry, very dark. So I can be confident all I'm really adding here is the shape. And I always try to add pigment for variation so that when the watercolor dries, it's interesting and not just super flat looking. I feel like I could get a little wider here, and since I haven't filled in this area, I have a tiny bit of black on my brush, and I put a lot of water to dilute it, but now I've dabbed it just to let some of that extra paint off. And what I'm going to do here is just go in super lightly just to show that the body comes out a little more. Adding a little more black, and then I can get, again, some of those blends. Okay. You can always do a bit of negative painting. In fact, let's do that technique, and I'll show you how to add. If something is white and you don't want to paint it in fully, like you don't want to put an outline there, let's go ahead and use our background green. And what we can do is paint around it. And it's a little bit damp, so we may get a little bit of escape, but that's okay. So I'm just doing this negative painting, and what that does, you can see right away, it makes the bird pop out. And then softening the edges, because this is not the star of the show. And I usually, when I do something like that, think about a diagonal. That makes it interesting. And so let's do the same technique up here by the top of the head. So we're just going to go in and go the shape of the head. We're just going to add a little bit of that green and then soften our edges. So we don't get a weird shape, and that'll just imply then it's going off into the background. And of course, it's always a good opportunity to do a little bit of splatter. I like to do that with my smaller brush. And I like to also, if I do an edge, go in fairly dark in some spots near the body, and then it fades off. And that gives a nice depth to your painting. Okay, we'll do the same at the top here. And you don't need much of that. It just needs to be in a few areas. And I love how the paint kind of escaped up in this area. So that makes a nice blend. Okay, so I think that's nice. It's definition. It sets our duck up off the page. So now what I want to do is think about, where do I need detail? So I'm going to surrender this brush for now. for the eye, we do want it to be small. So let's go ahead and find our pupil that I keep losing. And I'm leaving a little bit of a highlight, but I'll probably go in with a little bit of the gouache on top. And it's not exactly round. He's got more of a little almond shape, or she does. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then again, using black, but it's very diluted, I'm just going to go in and capture a few little strokes to show the contour again. I'm big on contour. And then, as I mentioned, we had nice blendy areas, but here we can go in with some sharper lines to indicate that it's actually feathers. And do it very sparingly. We don't want a lot. And yes, we have the reference photo, but as always, I don't take it very seriously. It's really just a launching off point. No one's going to be looking at my duck compared to the reference photo and say, that's inaccurate. Or I hope you won't be doing that. So again, emphasizing this neck area so that it makes this area pop off. And that's where I think the reference is helpful, because you can see shading and contouring and use that to your advantage. The duck's body is behind the neck, so by making this darker in here, it's going to have it pop off. And as you can see, I didn't have much paint, so I got this nice dry brush effect, which I like. So whenever you're painting and you see something like that happen and you like it, just do more of it. And again, these tail feathers are behind this area, so I want them to be darker, and then that will in turn make this area look like it's in front. Which I think works pretty well. Now for this area, which is dry, I'm going to capture some of these little shapes, and I'm not going to do it for everyone, but I'm just going to show in a very painterly style that there are these little half moon shapes. And I'm choosing to do it in an area that's has some depth, so it's farther back, because then the areas that are closer, they would just fade off. And you don't need very many of these. It's like if you're painting hair, you only need a few fur hair spots in order to show the texture of something. Which I think that's plenty as I do more. I feel like this is a little bit flat, so I'm just going to capture a few strokes that again is going to emphasize that contour, so things look intentional. And this area here really doesn't need to be white, so I'm just going to borrow a little of that and make a nicer transition here by blending. And you can see I'm constantly blending, integrating, trying to connect shapes that I think should be thought of as one. So I think this is looking pretty good. I'm just going to add a fewer darks here, again, to show the shape of our duck, and then I'll give it another look. So here, similar to how I did these little brushy marks, I'm just going to go in with a few more of the, what am I trying to say? The little loose strokes. That was not a technical term. Again, constantly blending, integrating, shape to shape. Okay, so now we just need to finish off the feet, which the ochre color, what you can do is just add a little bit of brown. If you have a convenience color, you can use it. I'm just going to take the same colors I used for the feet. And how do we neutralize something? We add the opposite. So in this case, it's purple. Of course, I love that we use purple because I do see some purple in the reference photo. So if you lean a little more toward the purple, that's probably a good thing. So I just added a little bit more. Yeah, I like that. And so here we're just trying to show the webbing on the feet. I'm not going to give the feet too much detail because I have my focus gun more in here, but I do want to convey that she has some web feet. Blending as I go. And then I feel like I need a darker tone. Has that, so I'm gonna actually go in with more of a brown. Yeah, better. And just pick up some of that, those details on the feet. Again, I sound like a broken record, but always following the contour. Contouring is your friend. And what we're doing is we're just adding a bit of a deeper tone to that shadow for a little more depth. If anything looks too harsh, just blend it out a little bit. And then this looks a little funny to me that I have this area left off, so I'm just gonna connect those two things, the shapes, the leg onto the body. And we'll kind of make this blend in just a little bit better. And I'm just looking at the reference photo again just to say, did I capture the shape, the contour, the colors? What am I missing? I feel like the eye is not quite resolved yet. I didn't leave enough of the color around. So I'm just going to go in with a little bit more of the yellow color. That was the ochre. That feels a little better. Maybe just there. Keep losing that nostril, so put him back in. Okay. And you know, this is where you go, am I done? Do I need more? What are the things that are going to set it off and make it feel like a masterpiece? I think that's where the reference photo is helpful, because you can say, what are the little tiny details that you see in it that makes it really, really sing? So I'm kind of going around going, okay, I have a round head and a neck. Do I need some more definition to really make sure I've captured the contouring, the shape? Love this area in here. I think the back tail worked out great. Love the negative painting. And I'm good with the feet. In this case, let's use some of the colors that we used in here. So let's go in with some of the purple. And then of course, the green. And you can do bigger drops for that because that is our background. Yeah, I like it. Maybe just a touch of the turquoise. I like that. That sort of emphasizes the diagonal. All right, I'm happy. I hope you are. I hope you're enjoying these um, no sketch paintings, because they just take the pressure off, I think. You just don't worry too much about, is it perfect? Did I get all the proportions right? It's, again, just to have fun. Ta-da! Great. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope that you're having fun. If you are, please let me know in the comments and give me a like or two. I think you can only give one like. I am going to, before I wrap here, do a bit of this white gouache right out of the tube. I found if I put it on my palette, sometimes it corrupts the other paints, but also it doesn't go on quite high enough. Okay, that's it. Now I'm officially done. It's signed. I've done my little gouache highlight. And that should dry a little bit softer as well. So again, thanks for joining me. Have a great day.